Way गंगाय तुलसी देवी प्रियाय केशवस्ता विष्णु भक्ति करे देवी सत्यवते नमः गंगाय तुलसी देवी प्रियाय केशवस्ता विष्णु भक्ति करे देवी सत्यवते नमः गंगाय तुलसी देवी प्रियाय केशवस्ता विष्णु भक्ति करे देवी सत्यवते नमः गंगाय तुलसी देवी प्रियाय केशवस्ता विष्णु भक्ति करे देवी सत्यवते नमः गंगाय तुलसी देवी प्रियाय केशवस्ता विष्णु भक्ति करे देवी सत्यवते नमः गंगाय तुलसी देवी प्रियाय केशवस्ता विष्णु भक्ति करे देवी सत्यवते नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः राधा कृष्ण सेवा Thank you. Vishnu Bhakti Pade Devi Satyavate Namo Namaha. Srimati Tulsi Maharani ki
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sahajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Balaram Sahagana Lalita Shri Krishna Kantamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurani Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Namaste Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Shri Vasari Gauravinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. English? Very, very grateful and happy to be amidst all of you here today. It's always a pleasure to be in this very nice community. So today I've been asked to speak on introduction to Bhagavad Gita. Of course, speaking introduction to Bhagavad Gita to new people is much easier than speaking introduction to Bhagavad Gita to several devotees who are already full-fledged devotees. But let me introduce Bhagavad Gita to you all in a little different way, so that we'll be able to understand, digest a little bit of Gita from a different perspective. So the Srimad Bhagavatam, when it introduces the living entity to the world, Srimad Bhagavatam calls the living entity as, when the living entity is born, Bhagavatam calls him as Jantu. It's a very interesting word that is used to address a living entity. Jantu means like, it's almost like an insignificant way of addressing. It's like actually got some entity, So Jantu tries to survive, and for a Jantu to survive, it can destroy others. The Mahabharata actually says, when a sibling is born, the person who has a Jantu consciousness, he actually feels an enemy is born. So that is where we are all at when we are born, basically. So when a person grows a little more, from a Jantu, he becomes a Jiva. So Jiva is a little higher level of consciousness. So Jiva learns the art of cooperation. The first time when a Jantu becomes a Jiva, is when a Jantu extends his hand and feeds the mother or father. Usually, we are taking from parents, right? We are taking from everybody. We're taking from society. We're taking from everyone. But first time when the living entity actually extends hand and says, "Let me give back to mother, give back to father," that time the Jantu actually becomes a Jiva. So as the Jiva goes ahead, he realizes Atma Tattva. It is a stage of healthy selfishness where a Jiva is actually thinking of how I can progress in my spiritual journey. Bhagavad Gita begins there. Bhagavad Gita doesn't begin at the Jantu level. Bhagavad Gita doesn't begin at Jiva level. It actually begins when Jiva is slowly walking towards Atma Tattva stage. That's where the Gita begins. So that means even for you to enter into Gita, you have to actually at least be at the level of Jiva and think higher. If you are at the level of Jantu, you can't understand Gita at all. And that's why is Arjun the right person to receive the Gita? Because he's already thinking from a selfless point of view. So, typically, if you look at the first chapter of Gita, Arjun is already talking in a selfless way. He's saying, I don't want all this wealth, I don't want the kingdom, I'll go to forest and live. He's already thinking from a spirit of cooperation, he's already thinking from the spirit of, what a Jiva should think. And so, usually, the process of yoga, the path of yoga, we are very, very far away from it actually. At the initial stage of our spiritual life, we are very, very far away from it. And a lot of people, they think that destination is important, but the journey is not. But actually, in the journey itself, there is a component of the destination. Right? Like typically when you go on a yatra, the moment you start planning, thinking that I want to go on a yatra, your journey has begun already, technically, And then you book tickets and all that, and then actually you board the train or flight. That's a different stage. But the actual planning, the moment you think I want to go to Vrindavan, yatra has begun already. The destination Vrindavan someday you will reach, whenever the schedule is. So similarly, the moment the living entity actually decides that I want to reach this destination, whatever our destination decided, whether Vrindavan or wherever, in the journey itself, there is a component of the destination. And when you reach your destination, you will also have the experience of the whole journey. And that's what spiritual life is. So the journey and destination are both incomplete without each other. So in the Vedic scriptures, these three elements of dharma, artha, kama, the three of them have an element of mukti also. And in the mukti, there is an element of the other three also. Right? So it's not like disconnected. So first stage is Jantu, when we are highly selfish. The second stage is Jiva, when we are trying to at least start cooperating. And then there is Atma Tattva, when we actually start looking at a much elevated consciousness. And then there is Vaikuntha Chetana. That's like the highest level that Gita helps us reach towards. Vaikuntha Chetana, it doesn't depend on human endeavor. It depends on grace of the Lord. It depends on Karuna of Godhead. And therefore, if you look at the Bhagavad Gita, it takes us slowly from the Atma Tattva level towards Vaikuntha Chetana level. Actually, it begins at Jantu level. Dhritarashtra Vacha. So Dhritarashtra Vacha represents that level of Jantu, like us stealing and hoarding and thinking. Rashtra, Dhritarashtra, determined to have land, determined to possess. So that's where the Bhagavad Gita begins, from attachment, and then it ends at detachment. Where Arjuna is telling Krishna, Karishye Vachanam Tava, I'll do whatever you say. That's where the Gita ends. And that's what Vaikuntha Chetana is. So whether you are a Jnani, whether you're following the path of Jnana Yoga, whether you're following the path karma yoga, whether you're following the path of bhakti yoga, it doesn't matter because in every yoga, God has to be there. Krishna has to be there. The word yoga means there is an element of Krishna there. Absolutely. And without love, no yoga practice is natural. Like, for example, if you study the Bhagavatam and you see Rukmani's love for Krishna, it's not just sentimental love. It's not just sentimental stuff, But her knowledge for Krishna helped her develop her love for Krishna. That means, in that sense, she's a Jnana Yogi also. There is an element of Jnana also in it. So therefore, the Gita helps us understand that no path is high or low. Every path is according to one's capacity and according to one's nature. So now, somebody might think that Jnana is a distraction to bhakti. But actually, if you see from a realistic point of view, there are a greater number of devotees who are having some kind of Brahminical background, some kind of, some element of knowledge, study, who are actually getting connected to the path of Krishna consciousness. Without that cultural background, without that little bit of jnana in your, DNA, you can't get connected to the path of bhakti. There are so many people who come in and they disappear after some time. Because somewhere, you need a certain amount of sukriti, a certain amount of piety to be able to hold the path of Krishna consciousness in your heart. So, no yoga is actually possible without the support of other yogas. So the purpose of Gita is not to create conflict between yogas. The purpose of Gita is not to create disharmony between the yogas. And therefore, like for example, Gita, Krishna speaks about how when there is human existence, all kinds of human existence is based on action. And if anyone gives up action, he becomes a Pakandi. Krishna actually speaks about this, right? Krishna actually speaks about how without action, so now how can you avoid the element of karma in your life? So many times, without understanding this, many devotees artificially think of giving up work, giving up karma, all kind of actions, saying that I'll go to Vrindavan and do bhajan. A lot of them who are not yet there at that level, and simply they go there, they create more disturbance than good for themselves and for society. And therefore, it is so very important to understand Gita from a holistic point of view. So when jnana is added to karma, then it becomes karma kaushalam, which means somebody becomes an expert in action. So the purpose is not just to become a karmi, not just to do karma, but to do karma in a kaushal way. Karma kaushalam means expert in actions. Just like Ganga and Saraswati are together, right? Ganga, Yamuna, Saraswati is what Prayaga is. But a lot of times we do not see Saraswati river. We see Ganga and Yamuna river nicely, but you cannot see Saraswati. Saraswati is wisdom that helps you see things that are not visible. So apparently, when you look at a devotee's life, many people are working in Infosys and other companies, you look at what you are doing in your organization and what others are doing in the organization, they are doing the same thing. But what is the difference? The only difference is that at one level you're doing karma, but because you're doing it with the right consciousness and you're using the money, using whatever comes out of it in the right way, it's not just karma, it's karma kaushalam. It becomes expert action. And that is what Gita is pushing us towards. So when you climb a mountain, there are many steps. And each step is beneficial to reach a higher step. So a lot of people say, lower steps are not important at all, only higher step is important. Can you step to the 75th step without climbing the first 70 steps, 72, 74 steps? You can't. 75th step may be the most important step, but the other 74 are not useless. They are helping you reach there. And that's why Gita is so progressive in nature and is so accommodative in nature. And Krishna does not allow anyone to go out of the path of yoga. That means whatever level you are in, you can get in there. You have some hope to progress. And therefore, you can't criticize any previous step. And that's what, as devotees, we have to slowly start learning. It's so very easy to criticize. Yeah. This is useless, that is useless. All are useful in its own way. Yes, we may be at a higher step, but doesn't mean that the lower steps are useless. They are useful to someone because someone is in that level. And therefore, if you study the 12th chapter of Gita, Krishna actually talks about who is a devotee from lowest level to the highest level. He doesn't allow anyone to go away. He says, if you can't do 100% absorption in me, then at least you follow a process of regulative principles and a regulated process of devotion. If you can't follow a regulated process of devotion, then at least start doing good to society, good for the world, welfare for the world. If you can't do welfare for the world, at least do some good to society. If you can't do any kind of good at all, at least gain knowledge. If you can't gain knowledge also, at least be a good person. That's all. So even if somebody is a good person, he is on one step in the path of yoga. That is how broad the path of yoga Krishna defines it as. So all of us are at different levels of practice. Just like Krishna Devarai in Karnataka, there was this temple known as Belur Telugu. So Krishna Devarai was constructing this temple. He once went to inspect the workers, how they were constructing, and he went disguised. So he just went and met one fellow and he asked him, he was like breaking stone. He asked him, what are you doing? This guy threw his hammer and chisel. He said, can't you see I'm breaking my head, breaking these stones? Frustrated worker, basically. So Krishna Devarai left him and went ahead and met another person there. And he asked him, what are you doing? And this person says, the king is paying me. I'm so grateful to the king. I'm reciprocating by working nicely for him. And then the king went to the next person and he met another person. And this person was carving the deities of the Lord. And he asked him, what are you doing? This man, he also dropped his hammer and chisel, tears in his eyes. And he's saying, I'm doing nothing. I'm just holding the hammer and chisel. The deity is manifesting by itself. So, look at this. These three different people represent the three different levels of consciousness of doing the same work. Apparently, they are all breaking stone. But the level at which they are breaking stone is very different. Somebody is doing it out of frustration. Somebody is doing it out of gratitude. Somebody is doing it at a level of love. And therefore, Bhagavad Gita elevates us from a lower strata of consciousness, a lower strata of thinking, to a very high level of thinking. Apparently, you are externally doing the same thing. From someone who has not the knowledge and the karma kaushal to see this subtle aspect of it, he will think, Array, what are you doing? Same work you're doing. This will also coding, this will also coding. This will is coding out of frustration. This will is coding out of love. Of course, they're not yet there. But ideally, we should slowly want to get there, basically. So somebody can cook at home out of frustration. Take the potato and cut it and chop it as if I'm murdering someone, So that is a level at which many people cook, Or you can see that same potato as something that is so divine because I'm ready to offer this potato to the Lord. So when I peel the potato, there is a lot of love in it, there's a lot of affection in it. You understand this potato eventually is going to go into the mouth of the Lord. So it's just the same activity, but because there is knowledge, because there is consciousness, the consciousness takes the activity to another level. Vedanta Desika, he speaks about the difference between different yogas in a very interesting way. Like for example, milk, sugar can be used to make different preparations, right? So when there is less sugar and more milk, it becomes payasam. Little sugar, lot of milk. When there is more sugar and less milk, it becomes a sweet. Right? One is soaked in sugar and one is soaked in milk. So like that, different yogas help each other move ahead in life. So some yoga this quantity is more and some yoga this quantity is more. But essentially both the yogas help you progress in the right direction. So therefore, it's the whole idea is of inclusiveness. Like say for example, the earth has all the elements. All the elements are present in the earth. Like say for example, 2000 rupee note has all denominators, 100, 1000, 500, 200, everything is there in it. Similarly, in Bhakti, all others are there. But the higher levels don't delete the lower levels. If you have 200, 2000 rupee note, doesn't mean that 200 is irrelevant to your life. That also is a part of it. It's part of the 2000, basically. And therefore, so mostly when you come from a very Abrahamic background, the idea is saying that this or this. But the Vedic background doesn't say this or this. Vedic background says this and this. That confuses people a lot. It's much easier to say black and white, right? But life is never black and white. Life is all in between only. You will never get absolutely bad people and absolutely good people. Even in the worst bad person, there will be an element of good in it. The worst of villains, they will be good to their family. They will be very loving to their children. So even in that bad person, there is an element of good in that person, right? So similarly, we can't say, or we don't have to say that we are practicing, the higher ones, therefore we are not practicing the lower ones. But it's because it's already understood that we are practicing all the lower ones also. That is how the Gita helps us reconsolidate. Like for example, when we breathe, are we conscious of breathing? Are we conscious thinking that? Am I conscious? It just happens automatically, right? So similarly, when we are practicing principles of yoga, when you are practicing the highest principle of yoga, the lower ones we are automatically doing it. Whether we are conscious of it or not, we are doing it. Every time we sit for the Bhavanam class, we are doing Jnana Yoga in one sense. Every time we are sitting for Japa, we are also doing Dhyana Yoga in one sense. So we are just doing it unconsciously without understanding that we are actually doing it. Basically. So a lot of people, a lot of devotees also many times, we focus too much on the future. And we focus so much on the future that we forget the present. Like for example, so many times our focus is so intensely on death that we forget to live. All the time we're talking about death. And we forget that we have another whatever 30, 40 years to live. What about that? So the practice of so rather than focusing on death or life, you should focus on Kala. Kala is a time factor. And that is Krishna. And we should be conscious of our eternity. That is more important than just focusing on death. Narad Muni, in the Bhagavatam, he says that the material body is sure to be vanquished and the duration of one's life is not fixed. And he says, neither death nor life is to be praised. Rather, one should observe the eternal time factor in which the living entity manifests himself and disappears. He says, Navinade dhruvam mrityum adhruvam vasu jeevitam kalam param pratiksheta bhutanam prabhavapayam. So he says, for the living entity, what one should really focus on is the time factor of Krishna. And there is a very beautiful purport that Prabhupada writes in this. He says the living entities in the material world, not only at the present but also in the past, have been involved in trying to solve the problem of birth and death. Some stress death and point out the illusory existence of everything material, whereas others stress life trying to preserve it perpetually and enjoy it to the best ability. Both of them are fools and rascals. So that means those who emphasize too much on life and fully enjoy it, and some people who focus too much on death, saying life is useless and temporary. Robert, both are fools and rascals, you see. And it is advised that one observe the eternal time factor, which is the cause of the material body's appearance and disappearance. And that one observe the living entity's entanglement in this time factor. So, a lot of times, we give people impetus to practice bhakti based on death. If you don't practice bhakti, you will die. And when you die, you will go to hell. So here, it's a very interesting way of thinking. Do not make death as an impetus. It's not worth making it as an impetus for you to practice anything in life. So the real impetus should be yoga. So when you emphasize the negative aspect too much, it doesn't appeal to an intellectual person. In fact, negative aspect is not very intelligent to speak about too much. So unfortunately, what happens is many times in ISKCON, preaching also, we scare people so much, and we inspire people to take up Krishna consciousness based on fear. Very dangerous way of preaching, basically, and it's a very dangerous impetus for taking up spiritual life. So the impetus for taking up Krishna consciousness should not be death, or should not be anything negative, any kind of fear, but it should be yoga. And that is a kind of consciousness that we should try to drive into people's lives. Like for example, the crematorium is very inauspicious, right? It's a very inauspicious place. But Lord Shiva is sitting there only. Why? Because he understands that is the place from which one can go to Vaikuntha. Dhruva Maharaj stepped on death and went to Vaikuntha. Right? So that means the impetus for us to practice Krishna consciousness shouldn't be that at the time of death I want to practice Krishna consciousness nicely. We have to practice Krishna consciousness all life long nicely. So that at the time of death it automatically happens. So if we keep telling that when I die I want to chant, we just lose the whole focus on life itself. And that's what the whole idea of yoga is. Do not step into the path, then do not step into the future. Do not lament about the past, but focus on the present, which is your journey. And when you focus on the present, which is your journey, that journey leads towards a greater future. Fear is not at all a great impetus for doing anything in life. Like, for example, we are a part of a voluntary organization. Everything is voluntary, right? So you can motivate people to do seva different ways. You can motivate a person to do seva out of fear. If you don't do this seva, then we'll throw you out. If you don't do this, then this will happen to you. So there are a lot of managers who end up motivating out of fear. And then there are other people who end up motivating out of reward. That if you do this, then you will use this mark, If you do this, then you will get this, So that's another way of motivating. And the third way of motivating, these are all ways of motivating that Bhaktivinoda Thakur talks about. And the third way of motivating is out of sense of duty. Saying that it's my duty, God has already given me so much, so I'm supposed to be grateful enough to do some service to the Lord. But the highest level of motivation is at the level of love, where I'm doing because I love to serve the Lord. I'm chanting because I want to please the Lord. I'm doing any kind of practice of my devotion because I love doing it. And that level of motivation, nobody has to push from outside. The first two levels of motivation, if that's the level at which you create, devotees, you inspire people, these are all externally motivated kids. You put a pressure, they'll do something. The moment you put more pressure, they'll do something more. The best performance comes only when you put pressure. You don't put pressure, they'll go to sleep. Why? The motivation is from outside. The moment outside pressure stops, motivation stops. So these kind of people that who are motivated based on externals there are three types of disciples. Very interesting. There is something known as dhela. Dhela means stone. For you to move a stone from here to here, what do you need to do? You need to pick it up and put it here. And when you put it here, it sits there only. The stone doesn't move anymore. You pick it up from here, you put it here, it will stay there. From here, you want to push it further, you pick it up and put it there, it will stay there. This is the first type of disciples who are like dhelas. For you to push them ahead, you only have to pick them up and put them next. Dhela. The second type of disciples are thela. Thela means hand cart. You know, you push it. How much ever you push it, it keeps going ahead. You know, so you have to keep pushing people. So there are a lot of devotees who you have only the responsibility of pushing is yours. So till the end of the line, you have to keep pushing them. Come on, Arati, come on, Arati, come on, Arati. Huh? And the more you push them, the more they go ahead in life. The third type of disciple is known as Chela. Chela means they understand the mode of the teacher. And they absorb the whole process of yoga. And they practice it based on the inspiration that is within. Not at all from any external push. And that is what yoga is. The whole idea of Krishna is inspiring Arjuna. He is telling, giving him full Gita, and then he tells him, you do what you want. Because he doesn't want to push Arjuna because, do something just because I am saying. He gives him the whole, and then he says, you do what you want. So that kind of freedom is what Krishna gives Arjuna. But unfortunately, we don't give that kind of freedom to our people we preach to. We end up catching their throat and telling them, alright, now practice. So when you push people to practice based on any kind of fear or reward systems, these external motivations, the moment that motivation goes away, the practice goes away. But ideally, we help people to practice their spiritual life based on internal motivation, which is the beauty and a sense of love. Like for example, if you tell a child, I'll give you cycle if you do good in exams. The exam is not the focus, the cycle is the focus. Knowledge is not the focus. The focus is the cycle. I'll get cycle first. So that is that's what happens when people are given the focus of the principle of fear and reward. Then it is that principle that becomes the focus and not bhakti. And therefore, we should inspire people to take up bhakti based on love, not based on fear of death, not based on any kind of lower motivation. If you inspire people to take up bhakti based on a lower motivation, they become more conscious of death than on Vishnu. What is the point in being more conscious of death than on Vishnu? Our consciousness should be Vishnu and not death, right? And therefore, if it's a small thing, that is the way Narayana addresses it. That is one small aspect of life. Why give it so much importance? And that's why Krishna laughs at Arjuna and tells him, don't get stuck with death. That's where the whole thing begins, right? Arjuna is stuck with death, thinking that I had to kill my guru, I had to kill my grandfather. Krishna is laughing at him. He's telling, you are talking like a scholar, but you're actually a fool. And because Arjuna is stuck with the principle of death, and therefore, the whole idea of Kshatriya Dharma, a Yodha, is ready to lay down his life. And therefore, a Yodha in the Vedic culture is given the status of sannyasi. Actually given the status of sannyasi. Because that person has risen above the death consciousness. And he's focused on sacrifice to others. And because he's risen above the principle of death consciousness and he's focused on sacrificing his life for the sake of others, his focus is not death, his focus is life. And his focus is contribution. And that is what yoga is. And that is what Gita is trying to inspire us towards. So, since all of you are beginning the study of Gita, so I thought, this might be a little different perspective of introducing Gita into your lives. Hare Krishna. Any quick questions or comments?
One question that I have is, while like definitely Bhagavad Gita is not saying take up this yoga versus this yoga. It's not all and like we practice on, but in places Bhagavad Gita also emphasizing that Bhakti yoga is the best. What do you?
Yeah, undoubtedly, Bhakti Yoga is the best. Bhakti Yoga is like a 2000 rupee note, in which all other notes are present. 200 rupees is present, 100 is present, 100 rupees is present, everything is present. So, the point I'm saying is definitely the 2000 rupees note is most valuable. Undoubtedly, there's no question on it. But we don't discount the other notes. That's all I'm saying. So, when we are practicing Bhakti, we don't say this is useless. When we are practicing Bhakti, we don't say that it is not needed in my life. Because Bhakti includes everything. Bhakti includes a part of knowledge, it includes a part of work, it includes a part of meditation, it includes all of the parts. And because it is all inclusive, it is holistic. Yes.
I have asked a question many years ago. To you only. I asked about the Eshantu Antagatam Papam Janama Punyagatam. So in that, how is piety related to progressing bhakti?
See, it's a very simple thing. Let me give you a practical example. Suppose you want to go on a holiday to Goa. Suppose. Now, when you go on holiday, how long you stay and where you stay, it all depends on how much money you have inside your pocket, right? Somebody might be able to go to a five-star hotel and yeah, 500 rupees in his pocket. He can drink one coffee, tea, and come back. That's all. That's what he can afford there. Somebody who has a few thousand rupees maybe probably can stay for one night. Somebody who has a few lakh rupees probably can stay for a week, 2 weeks, like that. Somebody who has crores can stay for a year also. Not a problem. But after your currency gets over, whatever amount you have, you have to come back home only. Right? So the part of the process of devotional service, it always begins with some sukruti that you have. Prabhupada obviously said, you don't have any sukruti, I created your sukruti. So if somebody is not there to create sukruti for you, you have to have something of your own. Right? So that's where the path of that's why piety helps you. Just a slight beginning, it helps you. You actually look at so many people that you preach to, a lot of them come and go away after a few days. Why they are not able to stay? Because something is missing in their life, which doesn't allow them to stay only. So probably they may have to, a few lifetimes of gaining of sukruti to be able to actually come to that path of staying for some time to year. And of course, eventually it is you have to. The piety will just help you get that first step into the path of Krishna consciousness. To sustain it, then is your effort. The piety can't help you sustain it. Then you have to put your effort on it. The piety just helps you get, it's like a launch pad into the path of bhakti. That's my understanding.
I don't understand what you are saying. I observe the same thing in myself and others also. When we read statements like Bhaktya Sanjayate Bhaktya, it is only devotion which will give devotion. It's not any other external factor. So there is a confusion happens.
So that devotion that is talking about is not your devotion. It may be the person who is introducing you to Krishna consciousness is his devotion. You understand? Just like when you have a hand pump, sometimes hand pump doesn't work. It makes a sound, the sound, only air comes out.
Yes.
So then from top you put little water. And when that water attracts the water below, capillary action, then water comes out. Similarly, when you say bhakti attracts bhakti, it's not your bhakti that attracts bhakti. It may be the person who is preaching to you, that person's bhakti will attract bhakti from your heart out. You understand? It's not necessarily that my devotion only will attract, will be the impetus for me to practice bhakti. It may be, that's what Prabhupada said, na? I created Supreme in the world. He was like the water on top. So there is water below. Everybody's heart. Krishna is there only. It's not that he's not there. But to pull Krishna out of your heart, na, you need someone to put first water inside. That's my understanding. Yes, sir.
So you told there are three categories of disciples, for example. Is there any chance that because what they're acting is because of their nature? So is there any chance that a third category can promote to second category? Because always somebody is pushing, because they are all are acting based upon the nature.
So, if you actually look at the way Prabhupada defines the concept of seva, many places you find Prabhupada always says service attitude. He uses the word attitude again, you know. I always wondered why is he, putting the word attitude again and again. Like logically, if you see, even from an English point of view, service attitude it doesn't make sense logically. Prabhupada purposely puts it that way. Because a lot of our progress in our spiritual life depends on our attitude. Lot of our progress, depends on our attitude. So some people who do not have the right attitude to absorb the subtle aspects of Krishna consciousness. The gross aspect of Krishna consciousness is very easy to absorb. The subtle aspect is very abstract. And the subtle aspect is the one that actually determines your progress. So a lot of people are able to work on their external aspects very easily. But because they do not work on their attitudes, they get very badly stuck. Very badly stuck. The attitude becomes sometimes the most determinant factor in your progress. So people can progress from a lower consciousness to a higher consciousness provided they are ready to work on their attitudes. Attitudes are not big things, they're very small things. Like yesterday we were discussing, something as simple as ability to say sorry when I made a mistake is a good attitude. And some people just hold it so tightly, the ego is so difficult to give up, they're just not able to say sorry. Or for example, the ability to admit mistakes. I made a mistake. All of us can make mistakes. But when you say, I made a mistake, that's good attitude. So when I hold my ego so strongly, my opinion, my thoughts, my feelings, that's what bad attitude is all about. And that's what the world teaches us. Our entire education system is created like that only. But when we come to the path of Krishna consciousness, what we have to work on is not necessarily only the external parts of it, but actually internal. If you look at Chaitanya Charitamrita, the highest PhD level, the highest instruction in Lord Chaitanya gives us another piece of teaching, right? And what is it? Humility, tolerance, respect. Now you might say, these are not spiritual qualities only. He didn't say that you have to chant 64 rounds. He didn't say you have to learn 18,000 verses by heart. Nothing. This is respect, tolerance, humility. And these are three things that you have to work on yourself. And because he says, if you have these three things, then Kirtaniya Sadhari. He doesn't say Kirtaniya Sadhari, then these three things will come. So these three things you have to work on yourself. And that's what good attitude is all about. Unfortunately, we are like parrots. We speak like anything, speak in our sleep also. Can we live by it? Can we actually act humble by if somebody is angry on us, somebody is upset on us, for whatever reason, for something that we have done wrong, do we have the ability to go and say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake? Unfortunately, no. Somebody is acting strange, we get disturbed by it. Do we have the tolerance to say, everybody has some idiosyncrasies. He also has, I also have. Let me just tolerate it. Unfortunately, not. Do we have the ability to respect people who apparently do not seem to be very people whom we want to respect? Because we expect people to respect us, but when we respect them, only then they will respect us, right? And the question is why I should respect first. Let him respect me. I'm sure there are attitudes around. So when we're not able to work at this level, what are we talking about? We won't reach there. Right? You may want to reach there. But for the progression from here to here to here is purely based on whether you're ready to work on an attitude or not. And that's something that nobody else can help you with. The spiritual master, all the teachers, they can simply give you thoughts. They can give you higher perspectives. But when actually it comes into your life, and the fortunate part is we are in the material world. Lot of opportunities come. Lot of opportunities come. At home, in office, on the streets, everywhere opportunities come. Every opportunity that comes, do I have the guts to actually work on it and use that opportunity to progress? That determines whether I will actually grow on it. So I can do a lot of service, but if I do not do service with the right attitude, that service is not really useful. I'll tell you something very interesting. One time, Radhanath Swami Maharaj was giving he heard a lot of complaints from people about this group of Matatis who were making garlands for the Lord, you know, and making beautiful garlands, very, very nice, beautiful garlands. But lot of fight among them. Why making garlands? Petty stuff, petty stuff, you know. One Mataji is saying, I want the best flowers. She takes all the good flowers for herself and leaves all the bad flowers with other people. Yeah? Very petty stuff. I'm sure everybody making garlands on the 80s only ultimately. But it's just that so much ego involved, you know. Maharaj said something very, very powerful and shocking to them. You met all the ministers. You're making beautiful garlands for the ladies. Your father will be wearing these beautiful garlands. But if you do not make those garlands with the right attitude, you may think you are offering garlands to the ladies, but Gopinath will feel he is wearing a snake. Man, Gopinath will feel he is wearing a snake around his neck. Because those garlands are not made with the right attitude. So attitude makes a big difference. In the way Krishna pursues our service, in the way Krishna pursues our devotion. And unfortunately, not too much emphasis is given on attitude in ISKCON. There is a lot of emphasis on service, but whether that service is done with the right attitude, unfortunately, we don't emphasize it. And it's so important in this. Yes, do we have time for more questions? Yes.
Yes, so earlier, one word I had, which comes first? Like most of the devotees say that process is more important. Process makes the man pure and perfect. That is true. But as you told, we will be there in the kitchen and the Hari once we work another facility. So how devotees should see and balance together?
So, see, it's like this. When we chant, the quality of our chanting increases the quantity of our chanting. And the quantity of our chanting increases the quality of our chanting. They're actually feeding each other, right? So the process helps us develop the right attitude. And the right attitude helps us develop the right process. They're interconnected. It's not that, I will first develop right attitude fully and then I'll start practicing. Or it's not that I'll practice fully and then I'll one day get right. No, it's both together. That's why I said, the Vedic culture is not black and white. It's all grays in between. So a lot of people get so confused because the gray is always confusing. Right? Black and white is very easy. You say, Chalo, first you do nicely practice. And then someday you will develop good attitude. That's easy to figure out. And somebody says, first you work on attitude nicely. Become Pranadami Suni Jana, so we do all that and then then you can practice. That's also much easier. But we all have to walk on a tightrope, which is right in between. So you balance, if you fall this side, you will fall, if you fall that side, you will fall. The thing is in between. Somehow, both of it happens simultaneously. So, we will not ever have a time where we'll get a break from all our spiritual practices So that we develop nice attitude and then start practicing. That will not happen. The interesting thing is, that is why Krishna consciousness is a lifestyle, right? What is the meaning of lifestyle? Lifestyle means every day you get to be a devotee, or you get to be a non-devotee on a daily basis. So the way you behave at home, the way you behave in your office, the way you behave on the streets, the way you behave in the vehicles, it's all Krishna consciousness, and it's all chances for you to practice. So these are all chances for us to either show that we are really sincere about our Krishna consciousness. You know what the worst thing is? The worst lies that you can tell yourself, the worst kind of lies are not the lies that you tell, but the lies that you live. Sometimes our life itself is a lie. You understand? So I mean, we're showing the world I'm a first class devotee, but actually I'm something else. Yeah. I'm not at all a devotee, very far from being a devotee. And that actually does more damage to our spiritual life than anything else. Because we realize that I'm very, far from what Krishna expects from me. Therefore, it is important that we work on our practices, on our attitudes, on our dealings. Because it really helps us in the way we connect with Krishna. Okay, so Krishna and Krishna devotees are not different. Right? So if we are very nice to Krishna and very horrible to his devotees, how are we nice to Krishna? Right? So the idea is, when we look at Krishna holistically, that's what bhakti is. That's what actually Madhyamadikari and Uttamamadikari is. But when we look at Krishna very specific, I see only Krishna and deities. But I don't see Krishna and devotees. That's the Kanishta Adhikari level. Right? That's what Kanishta Adhikari level is practically. So I'm very expert in worshipping the deity, very expert in chanting, very expert in doing the process. But I'm very bad in the way I treat others, the way I deal with others. That's Kanishta level. And I have a lot to progress. And Ramanujacharya, he was given poison by the Pujari in Shirano. He drank the poison, but he didn't blame the Pujari for it. He just drank it properly. And throughout the whole journey, even after the Pujari became his disciple and all, Ramanujacharya never brought it up. He didn't tell the Pujari, hey, this fellow tried to poison Sudur. Nothing like that. Because Ramanujacharya could see through that externals. You're connecting at a much deeper level. So that's what spiritual life is. You have a question?
Same.
Okay, perfect. Great. Thank you very much. Yes, bro. One last question.
Become more serious in
More serious in your practice?
more serious.
So I would say that be more natural than being more serious or anything like that. See what happens when we are thinking that I want to be very serious, man. Sometimes we look at things as impediments in our being serious. Like say for example, if somebody says things that I want to seriously chant, my 16 rounds or 64 or whatever number of rounds you want to chant, seriously chant. And in the middle of that serious chanting, if something comes up, if a child is crying at home, so a person is so serious in chanting, they let that crying child. Maya is distracting me from my serious chanting. So a lot of times we want to be very serious in our chanting, but we become extremists. Basically. I would say it is better to be natural in your devotion than to be artificially serious in it. Seriousness will come of its own accord. So Krishna consciousness is such a natural process that the growth happens very naturally. So artificially you can't be serious suddenly. You hear one lecture, suddenly I can't become serious. That's not how it is. That's never the way the process works. Because whatever comes out artificially, as I said now, any kind of external motivation, invoke some habits in us won't last. Because the moment the motivation goes, that habit goes. So what is naturally coming, so the seriousness has to be also cultivated very naturally. And we need to have a little bit of patience to actually develop it. Because sometimes we are not prepared for that seriousness as yet, right? Because everything takes its own process, own time to develop. So I would say that more than the serious part of it, try to be more natural in your devotion. You will progress much faster than being artificially serious about it. ठीक है ना? So I'll stop it. Thank you very much. Very, very grateful to all of you all for your patient listening. Thank you, Malu Thanku, for having invited me here and giving me an opportunity to serve all of you all. Hare Krishna. Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada,